Welcome back into another edition of Making the Leap. Thanks a lot for downloading the show, always subscribing and giving it 5 stars. It helps us when you do that, when you leave a message, a direct message to us, when you send us a note, particularly when you leave a review and a 5-star review. That's always helpful. And by the way, thank you. We've been delighted at what you've written and helped it grow. This podcast has really taken off thanks to your support. So share it with somebody you think might benefit. And as always, we encourage you to go back and take a look at the library of shows we've done since the beginning of time. I know that, time.
Well, I was going to tell you, I was looking the other day because I was actually sharing one of our episodes that we did last year. And I noticed that I think we're at like 77, 78 episodes, which kind of blows my mind. Like every time we kind of look at the breadth of what we've been doing, but I was so excited to go back and have this as a tool. Somebody was specifically looking for information on homeschooling in a state. And I was like, I have just the website. And I went ahead and I grabbed it and sent it. And I was able to send the whole episode. It was awesome.
I think what's interesting, doing radio my entire career, the one thing about doing radio shows 5 days a week is we'd have what you call air checks. We'd save tapes of the shows, maybe. But then you throw it in a box and you never touch it again. And you do, 3-hour radio shows, 15 hours a week, and they vanish forever. The one thing I do like about podcasting is it's like a library. It keeps a record, and you can go back and research it forever. So
it's such an awesome reference. I use it a lot.
I hope people do,
topics.
Because there's been so many great folks that have offered commentary. We've got another great one today.
We do. We're going to be talking with Keri Ingraham. She is a senior fellow and director with the American Center for Transforming Education. I had actually heard her talking with you one morning listening, and I was like, oh, and then you and I started talking about it, and I reached out to her, and I'm very much looking forward to it. I will tell you, I don't know. I always say things like this, and then I feel like I kind of get myself in trouble, but she is a smart woman. And sometimes I feel like women, they're...
Oh, no, I couldn't have
I know.
This.
Well, no. Do you know what I mean?
Like, no, I don't know where you're going.
You don't know. I feel like sometimes...
Are you putting me in a position where I have to stand up for women? What are you saying?
Sometimes I listen to females specifically. I can say this. I am a female, and they sound flaky. She sounds so super intelligent. It's a complete compliment to her.
We just started the show.
You know what? I just say it like I call it like I see it.
Okay, well then if we're here, then let's do this.
She's super smart.
If we're here, let's do this. You're saying...
No, you know what? Let me back up. Her voice sounds... She just was knowledgeable sounding. She was very consistent.
Are you saying that we've had women on this show that sound flaky?
Not us. Not our podcast.
Uh-huh.
When I listen to other podcasts.
Oh, man. Now, you see, we have a really great thing going with guest bookings, and now women are going to be ticked off.
Well, like I just said, I've loved the people we've had on our podcast.
You're not talking about
that is a constant thing I find in podcasts. It's hard. I do it. You've had to point out to me when you don't, stumble over words sometimes, or when I don't modulate my voice very well, or I'm not super prepared. She is on the ball. She knows what she's talking about. She has a lot of great information to share. She's published in multiple places. I'm very excited to have her on.
I was not expecting you to open the show by going after women, but all right, you did it.
You know what? There's men that are kind of dummies too.
Oh, no, there are plenty of dumb men.
Look, if you're going to, if you want quality people, I think we just look for quality people in general, and she is a quality guest, I think, that we're going to be talking with today.
All right, I'll steer us out of this ditch and move on. This is a great story. You homeschoolers, I had to laugh at this. Oh, you know what? Before I do that, let me just say, because last month, we haven't really talked about this since last month when we went to Washington.
Yes.
We were in D.C. for our second annual Excellence in Christian Education Awards for teachers, 12 of them across the country that came in again. Honored to MC that for the second year in a row.
So great.
This one was, the both of them have been fantastic. This one was even more interesting because we were able to meet several of them before we even went to D.C. to do the awards presentation.
We did.
They were on the show.
About 5 of them, and we had them on, and just knock it out of the park interviews that I think you and I had a really good time with, that were really well received by audience members, by their people at their schools, their families. I loved getting to have them here at the foundation, meet them ahead of time, talk with them, and then get to see them again. And I feel like that's really pulling together what Herzog is trying to do, creating cohorts of teachers that can help, that can communicate, talk, share ideas, kind of like mini little think tanks, if you will.
Yeah, it's exciting to know that this network of teachers from all over the country can now rely upon one another, pick up the phone and call and say, I've got this issue here, help me out there.
Yes.
From California to Massachusetts.
Oh, it was so great. And I know they did the trip to the Museum of the Bible. That was something that we had done last year. We got to go and visit that. This year, they also, again, I think they took like 3 different big groups, maybe 80 plus people, some that had been, most of them had not been. And hearing the conversations, again, if you've never been to the Museum of the Bible in DC, I would encourage anybody to go. You need at least a day, if not 2 days. And then I would say go back again because exhibits are always changing. But it really kind of brings it all together, brings everything home. Once you're talking about education and the Bible and pulling pieces of that together, it's such a great place. And that's where we had the dinner that night. And it's just felt so elegant, but it was not cold, stuffy elegant. Yeah. It was so wonderful.
You should also know that if you know of a Christian educator that you think is outstanding, we'll be opening up nominations again so that you can nominate your
pretty soon
favorite
too,
teacher,
I think.
like at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, not too far off.
So stay close to the Herzog Foundation's website, herzogfoundation.org, and you'll be able to also see, I think by now there should be some video up recapping our event, so you can see some of the video, and the guys have been working hard on some video and pictures from the event that I think you'll really like, so you can get a flavor for what that's all about. Hope to see you there. All right, the Washington Post. You ready for this? Homeschoolers. The Washington Post has decided to survey what is up with you people who homeschool. You're very curious.
Oh, were they curious? Was that curious in quotes or curious in reality?
What are you up to? This is growing, and they want to know what you're up to.
What that sounds like? It sounds like the old like shaky fist, like, what are you doing in that yard?
Yeah, they studied a little over 1,000 United States parents with children ages 5 to 20, and they want to know what's the deal with you homeschooling people.
Okay.
So here's the headline: Homeschooling today is less religious and more diverse, the poll finds.
Oh, well.
Thank goodness. Boy, you'd hate to think that homeschooling would be too religious.
Too religious. Can't have that.
Pandemic era boom has fundamentally changed the face of American homeschooling, transforming a group that has for decades been dominated by conservative Christians.
Horrible.
I know, right? Now it's more racially and ideologically diverse, the Washington Post survey has found. They're
that is a relief, is it not?
Boy, yeah. Rather than religious, homeschoolers today are likely to be motivated by fear of school shootings, anxiety over bullying, and anger with the perceived encroachment of politics into public schools, the poll finds. I don't know how to break this to you people at the Washington Post, but those things are all because people have a lack of a Christian moral compass. Just a little. I love how they talk about people leave public school because they're afraid of bullying and school shootings and anxiety and bullying.
Well, that's just a little bit of irony, though, right there.
Totally
for you.
missing the whole point.
Yes,
that's
why it's happening. But it's also a complete ironic statement from them because that's an indictment of the public school systems, whether or not it's a Christian background or not, or Christian, I guess, interwoven in the middle of it. But that's really not an endorsement for what's happening.
The poll's findings suggest American homeschooling is evolving from a movement into a practice, no longer driven by shared ideology and political goals, but by circumstances. The results on faith stand out, given the enormous influence conservative Christians have historically had over home study, parent associations, and lobbying efforts. They have shaped today's loosely regulated homeschooling lands. They don't like that either. It's too loosely regulated.
Well, I feel like whoever was writing that did not do full research because there are many, many states with pretty stringent requirements for homeschooling. Not all, but many. So I feel like that's a little misleading.
Pundits and policymakers and journalists have been speculating about families' motivations ever since the number of homeschooled children began to rise dramatically at the start of the pandemic. But that guessing game has largely taken place in a vacuum of credible data. The Post the Post's survey here found a group with a new blend of motivations and identities. Specifically, the survey finds families who began homeschooling after the onset of the pandemic are more racially diverse. Good. 7 in 10 homeschoolers were white pre-pandemic, and the Post survey conducted in the summer using a different methodology, under half are white. The change driven by a jump in homeschooling among Hispanics. The survey is inconclusive about whether black families make up a larger share of homeschooling than they did in the past. Fine. Great.
Great.
Wonderful.
Right.
More ideologically diverse. Families who began homeschooling since the start of the pandemic are about evenly divided Republican-Democrat, whereas Republicans previously outnumbered Democrats 3-1. I don't know why that even matters or means anything.
I don't.
Really?
Right.
Nonetheless, homeschooling parents are, as a whole, still lean more conservative and religious in general.
Oh, I know. I feel like they're shucks.
Yeah,
like
they're-
that.
yeah, so close. They just show themselves, don't they? With about 1 in 3 saying the Bible is the literal word of God, 46% saying liberal influence on public schools is the reason they homeschool.
I don't even know what to do with articles like that so clearly are skewed, and they have that bias already in there before they're even looking at information. But
about
thank
this one?
goodness we have reliable polling.
Yeah. 7 in 10 parents who began homeschooling since the start of the pandemic said they would consider sending their child to a local public school in the future, compared to about half of those who started earlier. So they're saying during the pandemic, parents that homeschool, 7 in 10 of them say, yeah, we'd entertain going back to public school,
Right.
whereas people who had always been homeschooling are less likely.
Right. Which,
That's interesting.
well, and I also think it speaks to what we talk about with parents a lot. Once you've been in that public school system and you pull and you want to go back, you've had that draw, it's there, how, I guess what you're missing if you don't go there, that kind of thing. Whereas I think a lot of families that start young right off the bat, their kids don't know any different, and they don't have to battle some of the issues, the dances, the activities, the stuff, and they've created their own communities that have grown enough that they don't need what's there. So I still think that's partly the case if you start young, because you don't have a lot to fight against. I feel like you and I talk about this sometimes. I think we fight a little bit against, at my old school, we always got to do blah, blah, blah. Well, now if you never start there, you don't have to fight against that.
Well, that's right.
To an extent.
Yeah, Anna, our daughter, who's now a freshman in high school, she looks at her old middle school friends who are still in public school, and she sees big dances and big school events, the social stuff, and she sees that, and I think she still envies that a bit.
A little bit.
But this is interesting. Nearly 7 in 10 parents in this survey say a desire to provide moral instruction is among their reasons for homeschooling. In a follow-up question, though, about half of those parents say this instruction is based on religious values.
Okay, so 7 out of 10, and then half of those.
Yeah, so half of the 7 out of 10 say it's based on religious values. So moral instruction not rooted in faith. Is an interesting discussion.
When we've had friends that very much have said, I don't need to go to church, I don't need to cling to a faith, I can just be a good person.
What is morality? I mean, that becomes a philosophical question. Then what drives your morality?
Right. And where do you pull that from then to teach your children? I think I find it easier to have a black and white, a biblical approach to that, but not everybody does. But it is interesting. I'd love to talk with somebody about their moral code and where it stems from.
This is funny. I mean, the whole column is funny. It's long. COVID politics shape parents' views. 3 in 10 homeschool parents say they choose to homeschool in part because COVID policies in their public school were too strict.
I think that's very true.
But that's not many. 3 in 10 homeschool because of COVID.
But I wonder if maybe the COVID kicked it off, and then there was more of and I also, don't like this, and this, and so I'm going to continue to do it. I don't know I don't know the questions from that survey specifically.
Now, this is hilarious. This is awesome. Ready? Nearly as many say they are motivated. Almost as many. So 3 in 10 said they chose to stay home because of COVID policies. Yeah. They say nearly as many. So take that to mean 1 or 2 in 10.
Okay, right.
Decided to keep their kids home and homeschool because of the policies not being strict enough for COVID.
Oh, gosh.
Now, I don't know who that person is, but I hope I never meet you or have any kind of polite interaction with someone like that. I don't want to meet anyone.
Okay, so you can say that. I can bash women
Oh,
here and there,
no,
but
that's
you can,
just a categorical dismissal of all people. I didn't single out any type. I don't care if you're gay, straight, male, female, black, white,
don't
Hispanic.
Want the COVID.
I don't want anyone near me that thinks COVID policies weren't strict enough.
Well, I don't know where they were.
You should be locked away in an institution if you keep your child home because you don't think COVID was...
I'd like to know where they were that it... Well, I guess, I don't know, maybe that's geographical because we did see some differences in COVID protocols and stuff and things, but where we were, I mean, it was like masks, plexiglass, face masks, tape around desks to keep people out of their thing, shower curtains hanging from hooks. Like it was insane in the membrane. So
and then,
I don't think they were surveyed for that.
but then you get to the nut of it. In the absence of meaningful oversight.
No.
You see, there's not enough meaningful oversight in
Okay, well, let's
homeschool
create a
people.
whole new department. Let's create a whole new
The U.S.
group
Department of
people.
Homeschooling. Secretary of Homeschooling.
Oh, can you imagine?
The Biden Secretary of Homeschool.
Gosh. That's awful.
Yes, parents who are not motivated by religious freedom might be more open to regulation, said a professor of education policy at George Mason.
Oh my God, I can't even.
This is a serious story. It was multiple pages.
You crazy religious people that don't want anybody in your business.
This thing printed out to be 13 pages. It's it's the most insane thing you've ever read. Homeschooling today, less religious, more diverse, and you people that aren't so nuts about your Bible, you might entertain being more regulated, like real public school kids are.
Gosh.
It's the Washington Post consistently does hit pieces on homeschooling and Christian education. They hate it.
Yeah.
They hate Christian education. They hate homeschooling. They're suspicious of it. They want to know what you're about. They think you're nuts. And they're constantly writing these derisive kind of, the subtexts are always, you're up to something.
Yeah.
You're fringe, you're kook. And the fact of the matter is it's growing. That's why we're here.
It is. And I always get to see conversations about homeschooling, school choice, that kind of thing when I'm looking in the different Facebook groups that I'm part of. And you're right, because you just said it was divisive. And I think that's what they're trying to stir up and do with that. When in reality, what I will see is somebody saying, I'm looking for homeschooling information, blah, blah, blah. People start sharing this, and then someone will say, oh no, we're not really interested in the Christian component, or we really want Christian homeschooling. And they put it out there and it's one and done, and the conversations then split off. It's not bash, go. Oh, it's not any of that. Or this is better. It's more of this is what our family wants. This is what we're looking for. And then all the help comes pouring in. It's not, whoa, back off. You don't do it my way, then that's no good.
Yeah. And of course, the undertone is ultimately columns like this and people that write things like this. Ultimately, it all comes down to the same thing. Uniformity.
I was going to say government regulation.
Uniformity, regulation.
Yep.
You're not doing it like everybody else is doing it. And if you're not doing it like everybody else is doing it, then something's wrong with you.
And then once you do that, you're not homeschooling. You have lost that sense of choice. And so then the next movement will come from there. That is ridiculous.
It's decades. It's decades and generations of all of us conditioning ourselves to believe there is one standard, uniform, acceptable way to educate our children. Right. And we're trying steadily, one day, 1 year at a time, one state at a time. There are now 10 that have said, no, you educate your kids your way. Well, that's the way it should be.
And that's actually perfect, because as we talk about that, one of the best things that's been happening with this is the universal school choice, the education savings accounts. And that is why today it is so great to have Keri with us to dive into some of this, as this is her area of expertise.
Yeah, so with that in mind, we bring in Keri Ingraham. And in fact, Keri, the reason that I originally interviewed you on my radio show was the Wall Street Journal editorial you wrote, and I loved it. I thought it was one of the smartest things that I'd ever read when we're just generally talking about school choice and public schools. And you wrote basically about the fallacy of public school not being public at all. So welcome into the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Well, the title of the Wall Street Journal piece is called Public Schools That Aren't Public. And what we see is that, while private schools may have some behavioral expectations or some academic expectations of students as admissions criteria, they don't keep children out of their schools simply based on zip code or neighborhood. But that's what public schools do through their policies, where students are assigned to a very specific school, regardless of if the school is failing, regardless if the school is dangerous. They don't let students move to other better performing schools within the public system.
Isn't that a great? I mean, I'd never thought about it this way, but if you live in a school district that's failing your child, it's not like you could go to the neighboring public school and the neighboring public school would let you in because you're assigned a zip code. So that by its very nature means it's not like a. Now, that's not the case if you go to a park in another city. You can go have a picnic in any park in any city you want. That's a public park anywhere you go, right? It's a brilliant concept. I love it, and I'm going to use it in the next argument, by the way. But anyway, I wanted to tip people off to that. You wrote that some time ago in the Wall Street Journal, and that was why I had you on the show, just because I love that. You've written some other things since, and I know Christine wanted to dive into that.
She has, and it was actually that interview that I was listening and thinking, I want to talk to her more. And then I started diving into a lot of what you have written, and the timing of all of it, of course, is so perfect. You recently had a piece just about education savings accounts, and that was in September. I first saw it out of the Independent Women's Forum. And that I really liked because you just kind of dialed down to the basics about what educational savings accounts are. Obviously, states across the country are all different from place to place, but I really liked that you were very just matter of fact about it, that these are essential if we want to actually make education accessible for everyone truly and not have it be a public, locked out of this or that by zip code or that, then we need to have things like educational savings accounts in place.
Yes, absolutely. And I am just so passionate about every family needs the opportunity, regardless of income, to be able to select a school that's going to effectively educate their child. Every child's uniquely created. They're different strengths, different learning needs, different interests. But also a school where that child is going to learn at the school values that align with their family. And unfortunately, what's happening in most of today's public schools are the teachings are so radical, and they have nothing to do with solid academic content, that kids aren't learning, those skills they need, whether it's reading, writing, math, but they're also being fed things that are just in hostile conflict with the best interest of the child and what moms and dads are teaching at home. And so education savings accounts, as well as other school choice avenues, are a way that families are being set free to select a better education avenue for their children.
Talk specifically about what an ESA would do for a family. How might it be used? Because maybe a lot of people are familiar with health savings accounts. We use that for our health insurance. So instead of paying like a huge premium in our monthly health insurance, we pay a little less, but instead we take money out of our paychecks, we put it into a savings account so that we can use it exclusively for health-related needs, medicine or doctor's appointments or co-pays. Education savings accounts. Is that similar?
Well, education savings accounts, they're commonly referred to as ESAs. So that's the acronym that a lot of people are hearing in the news. And what they are is they're government-funded accounts with taxpayer money, and they allow parents to allocate those funds that are in that savings account towards the K-12 education of their children. And so education savings accounts would be the kind of the gold standard of different school choice avenues. There's private school scholarships or vouchers, there's tax credit scholarships. But with these education savings accounts, they can use those beyond just private school tuition and fees. They can use it for tutoring, textbooks, curriculum if they want to supplement a school, or if they want to homeschool. They can use these education savings accounts to pay for therapies for their students with special needs. As well as in many states, those funds can be saved for college. So say that the family's applying a portion of the fund to some homeschooling curriculum, textbooks, tutoring, but they don't use all of that funding in a given year. They can set that aside. And so it's quite the opposite of what we see with public education, where it's just out of control spending and there's no accountability on that spending. Well, when you empower the parent's making the best possible decision with those funds for their children. They're stretching the dollars, they're being creative, and what they're not using, they're setting aside to save for college. And so that's the gold standard of education savings accounts within school choice. But what's really exciting is as of today, 15 states have enacted ESA policies, and 6 of those states have universal ESAs. So what that means is in 6 states in our country, as of today, all K-12 students, they're eligible to receive these funds, and then their parents can allocate them to their education avenue.
I don't want to.
2 years ago, we had 0 states. So this is historic, absolutely huge progress.
I don't want to conflate or mix them up, and I'm prone to do that. So forgive my ignorance here. We know that there are 10 states in the country now that offer what we call universal school choice. That is, the money that is allocated per pupil in each state now goes back as a credit to families, and they can spend that where they'd like. ESAs are something different?
Yes. Okay, so you're exactly right on 2 fronts. It is confusing because so much is happening in a great way so fast.
Yeah.
But 10 states now have passed universal school choice.
Yeah.
So all students within those states can select to use their funds for something other than public school. Mm-hmm. Well, 6 of those states have universal ESAs. And let me just give you those states. That would be Arizona, Arkansas, Florida, Iowa, Utah, and West Virginia. So universal ESAs. But then we've got 3 states that just this 2023 legislative session passed universal school choice, but it wasn't quite as robust as those ESAs. And what it was in those states are private school scholarships or private school vouchers. So all the families in Indiana, North Carolina, and Ohio now have the option to select the private school that they want and use the taxpayer funding for that. And then Oklahoma would be the 10th state. And what they passed this year was a universal tax credit that can be applied to private school tuition or homeschooling. So that's how you get the 10 states with universal school choice. But within those, 6 states have the universal ESA.
By the way, let me just add on Oklahoma. Those weasels. There's a tax board down in Oklahoma, and we're going to talk about this on future shows. Right now, as we speak, this is amazing, Keri. I don't even know if you know this or not. They're having a huge debate in Oklahoma. The taxing entity in Oklahoma wants to treat this universal school choice option, that is giving that tax credit, if you will, back to the parents. They want to treat that as income. They want to treat that as a taxable
that they've
event.
already paid?
Yes.
Oh.
So I don't know if you've heard that yet, but that is a huge debate. There are open hearings as we speak. And so the governor has got a real fight on his hands down there, and the public has got a fight on their hands there because Oklahoma, while they are a universal school choice state, God bless the governor and the legislature, the taxing entity there, and I forget exactly the name of them, it was a commission of some kind, they're trying to treat that, Keri, as income. So you've got to be really careful as we talk about this, that those taxing folks don't get their hooks in this. It's already allocated money. It's not income.
Yes, and you're exactly right. I mean, there's an all-out attack to prevent school choice in America because of the relationship between the Democrat Party, the teacher unions, the education bureaucrats. It all deals with their money. It's just a cycle where they want more teachers, they want more students in classes, more teachers, more member dues go to the Democrats. And so it's just a self-cycle, which has nothing to do with the education of children. And so, like you said, that tactic in Oklahoma is happening. What we saw in North Carolina this year was absolutely absurd. So the House and Senate passed the private school scholarships on the universal level in North Carolina.
Okay.
Well, the governor is a Democrat, Governor Roy Cooper. And what he did was he shut down the entire state. He said, I know that the House and the Senate have supermajorities, so they can override my veto of this bill. So really his hands were tied. So he said, I'm going to call a state of emergency. And he did that from May until just about 3 to 4 weeks ago as the only attempt he could to block it. I mean, so extreme. A state of emergency was what people were doing during COVID.
That's crazy to me.
The tactics and the lengths.
The veto was, and by the way,
that's absurd.
The happy ending to that is the veto was overridden. The legislature overrode his veto.
He relented here about 3 or 4 weeks ago because I mean, it was just absurd. There was no way that he could keep the state just shut down like that
And
indefinitely.
I'm having such a hard time too with that idea, because when you're doing that, it seems to me like such a crazy fear tactic that no other option is, nothing else can work. It can only be public school. We can't allow any other money anywhere else to escape. We have to keep everybody where they belong. And that just seems to me, I would think that would be red flags to parents, whether or not they plan on moving their child from one place to another, or that they want to look at other options. What is the drive behind that for him to say that nope, nothing else needs to happen. It only needs to be this option. That's kind of, to me, that seems red flaggish.
Political pressure, right, Keri?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at how much money the Democrats put in, that the teacher unions put into the Democrat political campaign. And so he's just beholden to them. Just as one example, in 2022, the National Education Association, which would be the largest teacher union in the nation, even in the world, they spent nearly $42 million on political activism causes, which was 99.7% to Democrats, while only spending $38 million to protect their members. So they're spending far less to do what a teacher union should do, protect its members, working conditions, but instead they're spending the majority of their money on these Democrat campaigns. And so then you get somebody like Governor Roy Cooper, who's that's why he's elected, that's why he's there. And so he has to be loyal back or he'll lose his position. And
all
so,
at the expense
again, it has
of
nothing
kids
to
and
do
families.
with the best interest of kids.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it doesn't make sense that we want to keep kids trapped in these public schools as, the one size fits all, because if looking at the data, more than 77% of K-12 public school students, they exit their 13 years of seat time, failing to reach proficiencies averaged across the core 7 subjects. 77% aren't proficient across subjects after 13 years. So why? Why do we want to keep our children in that? It's hurting the future, their future, the future of the community, but ultimately the future of our country, including the security and the economics of our country by not educating our kids.
Can I one more time, Keri, just explain it to me like I'm 5, because that's my mental state these days. I need more sleep maybe, but excuse me, universal school choice. 6 of those have universal ESA, education savings accounts. Explain how they work in concert with one another. Explain the difference and what that means.
So an education savings account would be the most robust of school choice options. So like in Oklahoma, for example, I was speaking with Governor Kevin Stitt toward the end of 2022, and he was all in on, he wanted to pass universal education savings accounts in Oklahoma. Well, he wasn't able to get that across to get enough votes. And so the bill got watered down to being still universal, but being that tax credit avenue. And so it's the gold standard. It's what these states are wanting to pass. But in other states like Indiana and Ohio, they were able to pass the universal school vouchers while it doesn't reach, students, say, in micro schools or in homeschool. It's a starting point. I mean, it's still massive. And so, everyone's trying to pass this ESA, which is so flexible. You can use it, for virtually anything education related for your children.
Okay.
But
so
they're having to do other levels of universal to get it passed.
So said another way, this is the state saying, here's what we allocate per student. Here it is in an account for you to spend as you see fit entirely. Not all of those 10 states have done it quite that, as you say, gold standard, but they're trying to flirt with it, get close.
Yes, just 6 of the 10 have been able to pass it that way. And it's not because those other states aren't championing it and aren't wanting it, but they wanted to get as much as they could across the finish line versus just having a bill die out. And so, some of them compromised and said, well, at least we're going to pass universal private school scholarships, and it doesn't mean they're not going to come back next year and try to increase that to the more flexible education savings account. So that money is there in the savings accounts, parents allocate it out,
And so when you say that, one thing that jumped out at me, and again, I harp on this sometimes a lot, actually, it probably I know it drives Chris crazy, but because what I heard, and I understand everything that you're saying, but you use the phrase government funded account for parents to allocate. So the minute I think homeschooling specifically, but I know there are other people, homeschooling communities specifically hear that, and they want that shut down because they envision it or they hear it as government oversight for what they're doing. So can you just, again, for somebody that may not understand, instead of, I mean, I know it is a government funded account. That money is, though, really, it's their tax dollars. It's their money that they have already paid to the state for education, correct?
Absolutely. It's their tax dollars. And I would say that is the chief lie that the opposition uses to persuade Republican homeschool families away from school choice. It's what they do in rural states. We saw this earlier this year in Texas when universal school choice didn't pass there because of some of the House members in rural areas preventing the vote. Now they went back to special session this week trying to get it passed again. But it's just that chief lie of saying that you're going to be regulated by the government if you have tax money. And they put this fear that you're not going to be able to homeschool your children or the government's going to shut down private schools or Christian schools. Well, I would say two things. Our government has already shown their cards. They're very much doing what they can on some other avenues to make it difficult for Christian schools. For example, just, making sure Christian schools have good content in their employee handbook, in their student and parent handbook, just on expectations around transgender issues. And so the government's trying to attack that way. And so it's nothing new that the government's going to try to push their agendas on these organizations, which, in essence, have a lot of family values or Christian values. But the lie here, it just doesn't make sense because think about food stamps. That's government funded, so it's taxpayer dollars. It goes to individuals in the same sort of a situation, the savings accounts or this debit card. And then the consumer can choose how to spend it within the allocated allowances. Well, the government doesn't say, well, you can't shop at this grocery store, but you have to shop here. And they're not coming in saying, we're going to strip away your ability to shop. And so we've got to break that lie on those homeschool families, on those Christian schools to say, no, school choice is an incredible thing.
I also would just
want to have fun.
And I would also just say, I maybe this is overly simple. There's certainly no legal obligation to participate if you're that dubious.
Yes, and you don't have to participate, but why not have your taxpayer money back to allocate it?
Right.
In essence, parents are paying twice.
Yeah.
They're paying, for the public school their child is not going to, and then they're turning around and paying for the other education avenue, whether it's homeschool expenses or a private school.
Yeah, that is one thing that is the one thing that I think in my head all the time that makes complete sense to me is that I'm very aware of what our public school system is doing with the tax dollars, and I'm very aware of the tuition check that we're cutting, and so I think, oh man, it would just be so nice, just for the state, for that state piece of it, because our local money stays local, and this isn't really affecting that local money, right? When we're talking about education savings accounts?
Correct. And so I would say another one of those chief lies of the opposition is that, these school choice programs will defund public schools. It's just simply not true. It's actually going to save the state money. So talking hard numbers in Arizona passed universal savings accounts last year under Governor Doug Ducey in 2022. Well, Arizona Public Schools has nearly $11,000 to spend per student. The families in Arizona that take advantage of this ESA, they have $7,000. And so the public schools are still getting $4,000, and they're not having to educate each of those children anymore, $4,000 per child. So, while their total dollars are going down, they're actually getting higher increases in the funding per student that remain in their public system.
Because they're literally still getting a cut for a kid that's not even there anymore.
Yes, they're still getting the federal funding, the local funding. And in most of the states with these ESAs, the families don't get 100% of the state portion. They don't get any of the local, none of the federal, but they only get sometimes around like 90% of the state. So the public school is keeping all the rest of those funds. But they don't have to educate that child at all.
Yeah, so let me just give you some, do the math on what you think that would mean in a place like Pennsylvania, where they're spending something like upwards of nearly, if it's not near, maybe over 20 grand a student, $20,000 a Pennsylvania student, Keri. I mean, it's sick money. Even at half, most homeschoolers, private school parents would love to have that money, even at half of that, And
that's Pennsylvania. You look at Chicago Public Schools, and they now spend more than $29,000 per student.
Cool.
That's up from $17,800 just in 2020.
And
so
there's no way those test
increased
results, there's no way they're coming out with any kind of viable results based off that money.
$30,000 a kid. Crazy. You could go to a college for that.
Right.
Most state schools aren't $30K a year, Keri. That's Jiminy Christmas.
Yes. And think about that increase that they had in 3 years from the $17,800 to the $29,000 per student. That was despite the fact that enrollment dropped almost 9% during that same time period. So they're refusing to do what any good business would do. If your volume goes down, you've got to adjust your staffing levels. You've got to adjust your spending, your facilities. You might downsize, consolidate schools. Well, public schools are doing the opposite. They're adding more and more staff members.
Right.
They're expending more and more per student, but the results aren't there.
There's no results to show
It's been proven. Yes, decade after decade, spending more on education does not increase student learning. It's proven throughout the decades. But they just keep saying, we need more money, we need more money. And now parents are, they had that front row seat when schools were closed, and they're saying the return on investment of sending my child to a public school, it is not there. There's a better way to do it. And parents are exiting, and they're finding alternatives that are much more cost effective, with superior academic quality and just better learning environments.
Great stuff. Keri Ingraham, it is a pleasure to get reacquainted. Best way for people to follow you and read your work, where would you recommend they go?
All the articles I write, as well as different podcasts, interviews, can be found at discovery.org/education. Again, discovery.org/education. You can find my Twitter handle there. Sign up to receive the articles via email once a month. Host of information out there.
We'll make sure we include that in our podcast description. Keri, it's a pleasure to catch up. I hope we can have you back again.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. That was a great interview. Loved getting the chance to talk with her.
She is a smart lady, and I'm glad she made the distinction. I don't think I'd fully understood the difference in the 10 states and the 6
states.
So yeah, now I get it. Even what we hear as universal school choice isn't quite, it's close and we'll take it, but you want to get all the way.
But it's great to have things to look forward to, and it's great to have that information and places to find it. So that is discovery.org/education.
We'll put that in the
Keri
show notes
Ingraham.
too.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you again for reaching out. As always, your comments, your feedback are very much valued, and we look forward to seeing you here next week.
Making the Leap is a podcast presentation courtesy of the Herzog Foundation. Please rate and comment on the show, as well as subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we'll see you next time on Making the Leap.